What? You can work remotely from New Zealand on a tourist visa? You surely can. On the 27th of January 2025, the government announced that the rules for visitors are changing and people arriving on a visitor visa or NZETA can work for overseas employers while visiting New Zealand. The new visa conditions will now allow visitors to work remotely for an overseas employer or client. The change applies to applications received from the 27th of January 2025 for all visitors, including tourists and people visiting family and partners and guardians on longer-term visitor visas. These conditions mean that tourists can stay in New Zealand as a digital nomad and keep in touch with work back home without breaching their visa conditions. Both visitor visa recipients and people who enter with an NZETA or New Zealand Electronic Travel Authority will receive these conditions. But there are things that visitor visa holders must not do. First, work for a New Zealand employer. Second, provide goods or services to people or businesses in New Zealand. Third, do work that requires them to be physically present at a workplace in New Zealand. So you cannot work for an employer in New Zealand. You might be asking about tax. The tax treatment of a digital nomad's income from working for a foreign employer while in New Zealand depends on the person's individual circumstances, and the individual is responsible for understanding the tax rules relevant to their circumstances. Now, generally, if the person's income is taxed elsewhere, New Zealand will exempt it from tax if the person does not spend more than 92 days in New Zealand in a 12-month period. The days do not need to be consecutive. If the person is a tax resident in one of the 40-plus countries with which New Zealand has a tax treaty, such as Australia, most of Europe, the UK, the US, and much of Asia, this period can often be extended to 183 days. And more information is available on Inland Revenue's website if you want to find out more about that. If the person is present in New Zealand for longer than the relevant limit for exemption, New Zealand will tax their income from providing services. This tax will apply from the first day of their New Zealand presence and will be imposed at the same rates as apply to New Zealand residents. Remember, only remote work which is based overseas is allowed. Visitors whose employment requires them to be in New Zealand, such as sales representatives of overseas companies, performers, and people coming to work for New Zealand employers, must still obtain visas relevant to their circumstances. So if you were to work for a New Zealand company, you will have to secure a work visa to legally work in New Zealand. Right, that's all for today. If you've learned something from this video today, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share too. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.